Hello, everybody. How we doing today? I need to get a way to share my PowerPoint. There it is. All right. Let's go back up to the. Well, I was going to go back up to the top, but I guess not.
So this is Katie again. I just wanted to say that in order to see the full PowerPoint screen, go up to view options at the top of your page, and you can have the zoom ratio to fit to window. And that way you can see the full PowerPoint screen.
And Travis, I think there is a arrow button that can take you back to the beginning.
Found it.
Okay, great.
All right. Hi, everybody. How we doing today? My name is Travis. I am a mental health counselor over at Sequoia Mental Health Services, which is right there on like 181st and Killiman. What?
Kinnaman.
That's the one. I'm like right over there. I work with kids. I got about 60 or so kids on my caseload, and I treat all sorts of things from anxiety, depression, to a little more higher needs things such as schizophrenia, things like that. It's pretty young, but I work with kids from ages 6 to 18. I have someone who's almost 19 on my caseload. And luckily they're doing a lot better, so they'll be moving on very soon. So here's I made a little PowerPoint. I know some people are a little more visual. I'm a little more, we'll call it talky. I like to kind of just go based on like what's on the thing and kind of just talk more about it. I know that multiple people have probably, if you signed up for this, you probably got sent a whole bunch of PDFs and stuff like that. And if not, you will be getting those PDFs.
You will.
You will be getting those PDFs. And they are a bunch of different exercises and stuff like that that I'll be likely talking about during this presentation. There will be time for questions at the end. Of course, I know that there is, if you want to, I believe we set it up so if you wanted to type it in the chat and I could possibly get to it during or after. All right. Let's get started. So my name is Travis. Got my they wanted a little background on me. I got my bachelor's in psychology and bachelor's in sociology from Central Washington up in Ellensburg. It is the only thing to do in Ellensburg is to go to school. So if in case you're interested, I got my master's in well, that says professional mental health counseling, which I think is dope, but it's more like mental health counseling and addictions. I got my job title, which is officially, like the official yuppie title is clinical care coordinator, because I also do some case management and things like that. But the real title is I'm a therapist. I'm a child and adolescent therapist. That's what I do. And obviously, my focus is on kids and adolescents. I have been working with them since 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. So I've been doing this for a little while. Been working with kids in different capacities. I worked in foster care at one point. I worked on the teens crisis line as a supervisor for working with the kids who did like volunteer there. So that was a lot of fun. And then I started working for a clinic up in Washington for a while. I got my license while I was up in Washington, and then I came back down to Oregon, and now I'm licensed Oregon. So yeah, we'll keep going. I do like the title professional mental health counseling. I think that's cool. All right, so we wanted to start with kind of how, like, kids in therapy, right? Kids in therapy is kind of a scary subject to breach. A lot of people get kind of nervous around either putting their kids in therapy or having some of these things around, say, stigma or some of the things that kind of come up with a lot of other parents are just like, well, if I just stick my kid in there, is it like a child mechanic where I can like drop them off for a few days and then come back? and get my kid all fixed up and ready to go again. And it's like, well, not quite. As much as I would like it to be the case where I can only work with a kid for a few days and they're set forever. Um, it would be different. It would be a little more, we'll call it irresponsible to think that I can just do that no problem by myself. So I wanted to make sure that we're talking about all the different things that come into therapy, right? So when it comes to a really young child, let's say like 2 or 3, and they're kind of having trouble like with daycare, school, things like that, we have to remember that developmental levels play a role in where your child is kind of at, whether they are kind of dealing with their behavioral stuff that's kind of going on up here, whether they're trying to understand their emotions.
¿No te duele aquí?
um, and we have to remember that we can't push developmental levels any farther than we possibly can. We can kind of work with intellectual levels, we can kind of work with emotional kind of understanding, but that's not quite the developmental levels are something that we cannot push any farther than the brain decides to develop. So I called this part big emotions and little brain, because these are children. They are small. They have a lot of emotions that happen. You'll see it a lot, right? Big, screaming, huge fits. Some kids throwing themselves around, throwing whatever, and they got a little brain. It's young. They can't quite understand it. So their little brain just tells them, well, time to explode or time to break stuff, because that's the way to get attention. It's a way of a communication for them. And remembering that we have to understand that they don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand like the real world consequences of falling in the middle of a grocery store and screaming and crying and kicking all the cereal boxes out of the shelves. They don't quite get that. They don't quite get the consequences of that. But they do know that it does get them attention, and that's what they're trying to communicate. They need something there, and it's not to say that they can't be punished or they can't be kind of worked with to figure out that's not the way. But there are other things to do to kind of figure that out. Kind of moving forward a little bit, we can work with a lot of things around. I work with a lot of things specifically with kids around anxiety and depression. These are the most common things, and they love to come hand in hand. They're best friends, and it's a vicious cycle almost all the time. Depression, so say we start feeling sad or we feel a lot of emotions and it kind of brings us down. And then we start to feel anxious because we're feeling emotions all the time, and we're starting to feel these things around, well, like how do I deal with them, and what happens if I can't deal with them, and what happens then, and what if, and that brings our mood even farther down. So that anxiety and depression, they love to go hand in hand. They are best friends, and it's unfortunate that they're best friends because it makes things a lot harder, especially for young children. Young children don't quite get that it's going on, right? And there are lots of different ways to deal with this. There's lots of just therapizing to do. There's lots of just like straight therapy to do, but there's also other ways of kind of dealing with these things, which is like we're going to briefly talk about today, while we have a lot of extra time for Q&A here at the end, and of course the most important thing, the door prize. So let's move on to the next little thing here. So I want to start with anxiety. We hear this word all the time. We hear, oh, I'm anxious, or I got anxiety, so this is what I do. And some of us as adults might understand exactly what our anxiety makes us do. You know, for instance, we understand that if our heart is beating faster, we might feel a little anxious. A little kid, they don't know that. They just realize that something's up. Something's up. And that's all that anxiety is at the most base level, is basically our brain is telling us something is wrong here. And then that's when we can check in with ourselves as fully grown adults who are generally fully developed. We go, okay, hey brain, what's wrong? And it goes, well, let me tell you. And for people who have generalized anxiety disorder, sometimes the list is really long. Sometimes it's, hey, you just need to eat. Sometimes it's very basic need stuff. Hey, you're super thirsty. So that's why you start feeling like something's wrong. So you just haven't had any water today. Or you've been sitting in the same chair for 6 hours, so get up. It can happen a lot. And so we have to distinguish between the two uh, of nervous versus anxious. We can feel nervous. We feel nervous all the time. I feel nervous right now. And there's something to be said for feeling kind of nervous around talking to people or talking to a large group of people, or especially during now with the pandemic status of just going out in general can be kind of nerve-wracking, because the second you hear anybody slightly cough or like clear their throat, you're like, uh-oh. At least I know I am. And that's okay to feel nervous around those things. Anxious is a little bit different. Anxious is generally a little bit higher grade. You'll notice they've done CAT scans and they've done a lot of things around the brain showing the differences between someone who's nervous and somebody who has anxiety or is dealing with anxiousness. It's in the frontal lobe. It's all up here. It's right up front, around the forehead. And somebody who's nervous is going to have some activity, but it's a little more spread out, because it's like, oh, like I can feel it kind of like in my ears and other things. Anxious is kind of a lot of activity in a lot of places, because your brain's just trying to kind of be like, hey, pay attention to me. And so for kids, right, if our brain is just being lit up as a kid, activity wise, if our brain is just being lit up as we don't know what's going on. We don't know what's happening. We start to get nervous. We go, what's going on? Why am I angry all of a sudden? Why am I sad all of a sudden? Why do I feel the need to pull on mom's shirt the entire time? Why do I feel the need to like do these things? And that part of that is, when you're a young kid, it's impulse control. When you're an older kid, it can come from a lot of different things. It can come from something that's called the imaginary audience. And we all know this feeling. We call it the imaginary audience because it's not the feeling of somebody always watching me, as in like my camera on my phone is always watching me. It's more like there's always somebody paying attention to every little detail of what I do, so I better not screw it up. Because there's somebody always watching me. And I don't mean like a physical person. It is a whole phenomenon that it's generally around the age of middle school. You'll see a lot of random kids become major perfectionists right in the middle of middle school, because you're like, what? And you have to go, what's going on? A lot of the times it's the imaginary audience. So what can we do, right? What can we do about anxiety? Well, there's quite a few things. For young kids, I have a couple of things, right? I have things called, you're going to get these sent out to you, but we use these things called worry cards. All right, you're allowed to be anxious. You're allowed to be these things. You're allowed to feel this way. So we can do worry cards, which are two different things. We can have it so write your thing that you're nervous down on the card, and then you can put it down later and deal with it later. Or some people also have it so you get a certain amount of worry cards a day. And if you have 3 to 5 worry cards a day, it's like, oh, okay, I'm feeling really anxious right now. I'm going to spend one of my worry cards. And that way we can address it right now. And then if I run out of cards, it's only so much energy that we can use to keep kind of spending on these things. And then it's a very physical thing for younger kids to do. Now, older kids.
It's very exciting.
For younger kids, or older kids rather, I have found mindfulness and grounding techniques. Now, not that younger kids can't do grounding techniques, but we've all heard of these, right? We've all heard of the breathing. Yes, my therapist tells me to breathe all the time. Of course we do. It's super important, and it works for them too. And starting that kind of habit at a young age of grounding and and mindfulness exercises is a super great skill to carry on into adulthood for sure. Some of us adults still need help with that. I know that I used a couple of grounding techniques right before I started this because I was like, oh man, I just heard that there are 30 some odd people signed up for this. Hope I don't screw it up, imaginary audience, but real audience also. There's a lot of mindfulness techniques out there. You'll learn a lot of them, and again, I'm sending out a whole quick list. There's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's 3, 5, 7. There's hot air balloon breathing. For young kids, it's actually one of my favorites is hot air balloon breathing because you're supposed to get all your air out and then breathe in all the way to the top, to almost to the point where you feel like you're about to pop, like you're about to float off the ground, and then you let it all back out again. It's called hot air because you have to breathe it all in, and you start to expand your chest and your stomach and all these things. And yeah, all right. Normally this is where I'd be asked for questions, but I'm going to keep moving and answer more questions at the end. Arrow. All right. So depression. Now this one is another super common one that we see in all ages of kids. Starting with what's happening in the brain. So the brain obviously is piloting everything. It is in charge of everything. Some people think that the heart is in charge of pumping blood, but while that's true, the brain is in charge of making it pump. The brain is in charge of everything. So when we have depression, there is either an excess of chemicals like acetylcholine, norepinephrine, things like that. We don't have to get too technical here, as much as I'm a brain nerd and I love that stuff. It is basically your brain is not as active as the neurotypical brain. Neurotypical meaning the most kind of classic, very normal brain, as it's called. It is a lack of activity. It is either a lower level of activity or some parts are not active at all. So you'll see very spacey kids. You'll see very kids who are just kind of spaced out, not doing anything, or kids who just like constantly are looking down or whatever. We've seen kind of an uptrend in kids, not just kids, but teenagers especially when it comes to depression. We've seen a major upturn when it comes to a lot of these things, and researchers are trying to figure out where that's coming from. Is it an environmental thing? Is it a biological thing? More and more people are getting diagnosed with depression to figure out this is what's going on. So is it becoming a biological thing? A very common thing that happens with depression is a thing called cognitive distortions. And this basically means if 1 + 1 = 2, right? That is a normal thing. That is a totally normal thing. It makes all the sense in the world, right? Cognitive distortions are basically when your brain tells you something that isn't correct is correct. So 1 + 3 = 2. That would be a cognitive distortion in the sense that, no, that's not correct. But your brain is saying, yes, it is. It's absolutely correct. I have researched this. This is 100% correct. And you go, wait, no, it isn't. And you have to really battle yourself a lot of the time, which causes a lot of cognitive distress and just distress on the body and brain in general. Now, these happen to everybody, right? Adults deal with this, kids deal with this, teenagers deal with this, grandmas, grandpas deal with this all the time. These happen to everyone, right? The very common one I hear all the time is, I don't have any friends. Okay, so you don't have any friends. So who are all the contacts in your phone? Like, oh, well, it's my mom and my dad and my sister and my grandma and my friends. Wait a minute, you said you just didn't have any friends. That's a cognitive distortion. They have friends, but their brain is telling them, I don't have any friends. And you hear it a lot. And it really, it honestly is a sad thing that you see very often. Or another one that you hear for adults is, I don't have time. I don't have time. There's no time. It's like, okay, let's quite literally walk through your day. Like, walk me through every minute of your day, starting with waking up. Okay, you wake up. It's like, well, I check my phone for like a half hour. Okay, so is that a productive use of your time? And figuring those types of things out. See if we can shave off some time. 15 minutes there, 15 minutes there. And that adds up pretty quickly. There's only 60 minutes in an hour, not 100. That adds up. So a lot of the things that we end up kind of doing to kind of work with this, work with cognitive distortions, work with depression, kind of those feelings, talking through them, is coping skills. The classic coping skills stuff. There is healthy coping and there is unhealthy coping. I'm sure you know some healthy coping skills off the top of your head, right? Exercise, the classic healthy coping. There is things like yoga, meditation, mindfulness. These are considered healthy coping skills. They're very basic, common, healthy coping skills. There is unhealthy coping. I'm sure you can think of a couple of things off the top of your head here. Drinking, drugs, punching walls. It's a pretty common one. I got a kid who's got a broken hand right now.
Tatiana says Nutella.
Nutella, not super healthy. Delicious, not super healthy, right? Very common things that you hear all the time. And we have to kind of end up determining what is healthy versus what is unhealthy. I'm not saying a snack of Nutella is a bad thing every time. But if you do it every single time, it might start to get a little unhealthy. If it's the only thing we use to cope. And then you wonder why the store is out of Nutella. But then you kind of realize, okay, but this is a common one, like video games. This is the one I hear from parents a lot. My kid is always playing video games. It's like, okay, well, are they using it to deal with something, or is it an entertainment thing? It's like, well, they have depression and they don't feel like they can ever come out of their room. It's like, okay, so they're coping with it. All right. Are they making sure that they're taking care of all the things that they need to? Are they doing all their homework? Are they eating? Are they taking care of basic needs stuff? Video games aren't inherently a bad thing, but when it starts to detract from other things is when it becomes an unhealthy coping skill. And that's the common one that I hear a lot from parents specifically. I kind of lost my train of thought. Oh, you will be getting a whole bunch of handouts. I gave them like 6 or 7 PDFs to send to all of you. They're printable. They're ready to go. They're all free for you. Like, just use them. They're awesome. Or at least read through them so you can be like, oh, maybe I'll use some of these. And if you want, you can even practice them with your kids. One of my favorites is the for anxiety. Going back to the anxiety thing is the using 1 minute to silently stare around the room and see what you notice that isn't there. And then after that minute is up, you time it. Literally, like, time it. And then you go, I noticed that there is a weird blue stain on this wall. I don't know where that blue came from. I don't have anything blue in that corner, but I noticed it, And that can bring us back down from anxiety. Okay, moving to the next one with the right arrow. All right, so parenting. This is kind of the next step, right? I can do a lot of stuff in therapy. I can do a lot of stuff in therapy. I only have an hour. I have an hour, and sometimes I have an hour only every 2 weeks with some kids. So out of their entire life, right? Let's go. 72 hours is 3 days. So 6 days is 144 hours, plus another 24 is 168 hours, right? Okay, so 168, thank you for nodding. 168 hours
How to use a
is
calculator.
1 week. It's all up here. Is 1 week, and then multiply that by 2, so 338 or 336 is 2 weeks. So if I'm seeing them 1 hour out of 336 hours that they exist, I can only do so much. So what happens? I don't know why I did all that math for you. Maybe I was just showing off. But I only have so much time with them to work with them and to do all these things with them and to, quote unquote, cure them. But that's not my job. My job is to help them. And it is your job as the parents to parent them. I can obviously instill some ideas, maybe some with the family, trying to align values, things like that, of course, right? And when it comes to parenting, I also work with families to kind of deal with like, all right, because if I take the kid out of something that is not working for them, but then I put them right back into something that's not working for them, not saying that the parents aren't working for them, but if there is something going on at home that is not working well, but then they just get taken out for an hour and put right back at it, it doesn't, they only have so many skills to deal with it, especially at such a young age. So I wanted to send out this thing called positive parenting, and there are courses on this positive parenting thing. There's all sorts of stuff out there. You can Google it. It's awesome. I'm also sending you a thing, or they're sending you a thing about this positive parenting. And positive parenting is kind of learning basic, very rudimentary, almost counseling skills to understand and talk to your kids. Because if the first thing that happens when a kid says, "Hey, I'm feeling pissed off right now," is like, "Yeah, I'm pissed off too." It's like, well, okay, like that doesn't really help them. It's like, okay, so like let's talk a little bit more about it. I'm not saying any of you do that. In no way, shape, or form am I saying any of you do that. But it's a relatively common thing that I end up seeing is when some of these kids are struggling with how to communicate or learning how to approach their parents with things, is hard. And so as positive parents, we can learn and push forward with some of these things to kind of figure out what it is we need and figure it out what it is that the kids need to work better. Yes.
Travis, we have a question. I want to go ahead and let, is it San Juan?
San Juana.
San Juana,
San
yeah,
Juana.
please.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
we got.
I have a question. So my daughter, she is on the spectrum and she classified pretty high. She's at a 13, and I know 9 is like really high.
It's pretty high, yeah.
But she's very high functioning as well. Very smart, but her main things are anxiety and social anxiety. So she has generalized anxiety on top of regular anxiety. And now we're going to the point where she has the hormones. She's at 11, going into 12 this year. And she's shutting down a lot. Like I've learned to communicate with her, like you were saying, when she says she's mad, you go, "Oh, what's going on?" or "What made you mad?" or "How can I help you?" So I've learned to do different strategies with her. My only issue is now that we're kind of combining everything, I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I came and took this webinar, just to see if maybe you guys would have ideas on how I can stop her from shutting down. Because with her anxiety, it's easy to shut down. And we had a significant death in the family. My mom passed away, and Layla was really attached. I took care of my mom for 8 years.
Yeah.
And when we had her bed still, she'd lay on the bed, but I had the bed removed like as soon as possible. And I just don't know how do I bring her out of that? Knowing that I have the communication.
Right, of course. And obviously you're an expert on your kid. And then they're the expert on themselves, correct?
Correct.
But
and that's something I have said, like, I'm not teaching Layla to live in our world. I'm adjusting my life to live in her world because I know that they see it in a different perspective.
Sure, totally.
And I just don't know. I see her really, really shutting down. So what would you suggest on, or if you can talk about strategies that can help pull kids from something like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You hear about kids shutting down a lot, right? Kids going into their phone is a very common thing now.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how they shut down, because this is a magical cube that can show us anything that we want forever and ever and ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there may or may not, when it comes to your daughter, about some possible unsolved grief or unresolved
Mm-hmm.
grief. Grief is absolutely a very difficult, very un like not planned thing. It's very, back and forth. Some people believe in the stages, some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but maybe being and trying to bring that open dialogue about like how we can kind of handle some of these things, inviting, using some of those invitational skills to just be like, hey, I'm here, I know that I've noticed this, and I'm not shaming you for it, I'm not shaming you for shutting down, I don't blame you at all, these things are really hard to deal with. um, but maybe we can do something together so that we can both communicate our
Okay.
feelings in a maybe a more maybe a little less practical of a way, instead of just talking about it. And let's write letters together, or
Ah.
we can write letters to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not through this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not through the phone, so we can mix that up. We can use a different skill that she likely has of writing or being able to communicate in a different way. Because as many kids, not all kids, but with autism, have different ways of communicating.
Absolutely.
They can
Mm-hmm.
communicate. It's just different from the way that a lot of other people communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's finding a different way to communicate your your feelings, in that way you can lead by example, to show her, oh, I can also communicate this way, I just didn't know that I could, or I didn't know that it was an option. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, it
Okay.
does. I think that's helpful, just because I know that, like, I've really tried to educate myself to learn her
Yeah.
so that we don't shame her, we don't exclude her. Like, she doesn't have a very good sense of her proprioceptive sensory.
Hmm.
So her spatial space is very, very wide.
Yes.
And I've seen things that I've not seen in her before, like her unorganization. She has OCD, so she's very organized, and her
Hmm.
room is a mess. Her timing of sleeping has drastically changed since the incident. And I know it's fairly fresh, but it's still significant changes in her that I just didn't know how to wrap my brain around it so that I can positively help her. Does that make sense?
Of course, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. We're as parents, everyone's trying to learn with their kid, and learn kind of their kid in every stage, and each stage
Mm-hmm.
that she goes through, and each stage that all of your kids go through, all the other parents in here, are kind of are all going to be different. The
Mm-hmm.
developmental level of your kid is going to be way different than somebody else's. uh,
Absolutely.
and so you're like figuring out the way to positively impact your kid is
Mm-hmm.
going to change. And that's the beauty of working either with a therapist or with somebody who's a family person, if you want to, of course.
No,
um,
I do have her in therapy. We just started. Um, she has her third session tomorrow,
awesome.
but she being on the spectrum, she has a really hard time with transition. So this is a new person she has to adapt to,
Totally.
which is gonna take her a while.
Yeah.
It takes her a minute to adapt to a new person because of her social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That I was trying to see how I could be more supportive at home. Like you said, you have 368 hours a week, and
Yeah.
therapist only helps 1 hour, you know?
We can only do so much in that hour. We jam it. We jam pack it. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. And as parents, we need to kind of work with the therapists
Mm-hmm.
to continue to guide our child to be a successful adult.
Right. Right.
Mhm,
And you
mhm.
said she was turning 12 this year?
She is, and that's my issue, is with the anxiety and the depression and the hormones. I don't know how to maneuver all that.
Oh, it'll be a shift.
Mhm.
It'll be a shift too. Because 12, 13 is when they start realizing, oh, I can actually be autonomous. But somebody who is on the spectrum may or may not quite realize that right away, or quite understand either like I am either connected at the hip with somebody, or I am autonomous and I am completely separate from them. So
Mhm.
that's something that that you get to figure out and kind of maneuver, and also
Well, I can let you know this much. She's 11, going on
yes.
12, and she's still in my bed.
Okay.
And I'm okay with it. I mean, if that's gonna make her comfortable,
Sure.
it's okay. Like I said, we've adapted to her living,
Mhm.
not her to our living. Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
Okay.
Sanwana, I'm so glad you are here today, and I'm so happy you asked your question. I think that some of the resources Travis gave me to share may be helpful too. So I'll get those out to you after the session, and let us know if they help.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, that stuff's coming your way. You're about to get a whole big old email.
Thank you.
Which kind of leads into my next part here a little bit. Very well, thank you so much. About getting help yourself as a parent. No shame whatsoever. There is no ultimate parenting book. Otherwise, that person who wrote it would be a millionaire, billionaire, whatever. There is no perfect parent. There is no perfect anything. We need to work with ourselves to be like, okay, I'm working with my kid, I'm working with the therapist, I'm working with my own therapist, because some of it is mirroring, especially with the young kids. The very young kids, they are just mirrors of ourselves. And they go, oh, I see my mom is crying all the time, so I should cry all the time? Question mark. I think so. And it's not a bad thing either, because they realize, okay, like I can see what mom is doing, and I care for mom, so that's okay. I want to work with mom and be with mom. So mom is crying all the time, I'm gonna cry all the time. And then mom starts to go, oh my god, why is my kid crying all the time? And it was simply because they thought that that's what people do. I worked with a 6-year-old that was basically exactly what happened. And it was, the mom needed to get some help, and that's okay, just to get some own mental health help or family help or whatever, just to figure out some things. And reminding everybody that, like, it's okay to get that help, and there is absolutely no shame in getting the help that you possibly would need for learning to be the best parent you can possibly be. Okay, right on. Look at this classic clip art of the questions. What questions do any of you have? I can't currently see the chat, but I bet I can pull it up. I see hand of the mail, resources. Oh, yes, perfect. So I did catch everything.
Yes.
Questions. Who's got questions? It is now open floor.
I have a question.
What do you got?
How long do you think people are what's the average length of time children may be in therapy? Or do you know, is there any, yeah, do you have any information about that? If someone were to say, I might want to get my child therapy, but I don't know how long it will take. Does it depend? Is there some general guidelines? What do you usually tell parents?
Well, one of my favorite thing to tell parents is it depends. It very much varies based on the needs of the child, the kind of needs of the family in general. There are different ways of kind of handling certain things. Some kids become incredibly attached to their therapist and use it as a very valuable resource, and that's totally okay. And some kids are, hey, I need to kind of process my recent breakup. This is a little more on the teenager side of things. I hope 7-year-olds aren't going through hard breakups. But but like that's I worked with a kid about a year ago, and for about, I don't know, it was like a 2-3 month thing. Saw her every other week, and we just literally processed some of the breakup stuff. And it was a lot of reminders of it's okay and it takes time. So that's a pretty, it really varies when it comes to your kid's needs. Sorry,
good.
that's not more clear of an answer.
No,
but
actually it's good because it does make it seem like, sometimes it's a short-term thing that can be talked through in a small amount of time, and sometimes it's not. But I think that is a good answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw the question in the chat about negative self-talk. It said, what can be done about negative self-talk? This is a super classic thing with teenagers a lot of the time. Now, it's also something that little kids do sometimes as well. They screw something up, or they make a mistake, and it's, oh, I'm a big dumb idiot. I'm the worst. I suck at everything. I'm the spawn of the devil, or whatever they say. It can go in many directions. The hope is that your kid doesn't believe any of that, right? There's a couple of different things I've done with working with negative self-talk. I've done, one of my personal favorites was to pretend it's somebody else saying it. Would you let them say that to you? So like if you screw something up and you go, I spilled my water, I'm the worst kid in the world. Would you let them say that to you? It's like, well, no. And it's like, well, then why are you saying it to yourself? And because you don't want that kind of thing to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, obviously. Sometimes we call it a whole nother name. We call it like, let's say the kid's name is I don't know, Michael, and then we call the voice, something else. We call that voice Cameron, and that voice is the worst. And Michael's the good one, and Cameron's the bad one, and that's the one who says all the mean things. We don't like them, so we're gonna ignore them. They're not a nice person. We don't want to associate with not nice people. We're gonna move on. And that's a pretty common one, and it's also to another one of the things that I've done with a young kid is when they start feeling that negative self-talk come on, which was fairly frequent for them, when they start to feel it really bubble up and boil up, was all right, like, I know you feel like you want to say some mean things about yourself. Give me 3 nice things. And you kind of it's a little bit of a push sometimes. It's a little bit of a push-pull thing, but you got to push them a little bit and go, all right, I want 3 nice things. Like, tell me you like your hair or something. Give me 3 nice things. And I just and then eventually you either get one of 2 results, where they start feeling better about themselves and they start feeling good about, like, yeah, I'm not such a bad person, or I'm not the worst at this, or math is hard. Like, it's okay to be bad at math, because I just need some extra help. Or they get so tired of doing the exercise that they go, you know what, forget it. I'm not even going to think negatively. because I don't want to do this positive thing. And it's like, okay, if it stops the negative self-talk, which would be a net positive. And we will take net positives sometimes, because we can't expect to be perfectionists or cured of every piece. Okay. I hope that answers your question for a couple of things that you can do. I also know that negative self-talk is not an easy thing to deal with, because we don't want our kid to feel any sort of negativity ever at all.
Travis, if you want to stop sharing, I think we can see people.
Sure.
See if there's any other questions.
Stop share.
Nice.
Is this what teachers feel like when like everyone's just like muted and no photos? And
Probably.
Are there any certificates for staying with your class, just out of curiosity?
as in staying like in
Form of presence. Is there any certificates or anything like that? Like that I was here and I not participated, but I sat through your classes and learned something from you.
that would be a
For this session, you mean? Are you talking about like for attending this session, or?
Yeah, just in general.
Katie, do you want to respond to that?
Katie, you're muted.
Yeah, got it. So we designed this series for parents and guardians, and not necessarily for a training session. If you need to have some kind of verification that you participated or listened to this session, just contact us separately afterwards, and we'll see based upon your need as to why you would need this, because normally this is not meant to be a training session. This is meant to be helpful for parents and guardians.
Informational.
And it has been. I was just curious. Thank you. You've
Sure.
answered me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
There's a question in chat, Travis.
Yeah, I saw that. Child therapists are really difficult to get plugged into. Is there a resource with contacts for therapists across the Portland metro area?
Good question.
Well, it is any place's duty to, if you call them, to let you know where they are. And I mean that as in, if you were to call LifeWorks, for instance, and LifeWorks didn't have anything available for your specific time, LifeWorks would be like, okay, check these places out. And same with Sequoia. If you called Sequoia and said, hey, like these are my times, can we do something along these lines? These are my needs, whatever. We're gonna be like, here's what we can do. Does this work? Et cetera, et cetera. We'll work with you, and we'll figure it out from there.
Is maybe the question, are there any professional organizations that you can plug into? Was that can I rephrase your question that way?
I hope so.
I don't know, Travis. do you know?
Bridges.
Yeah, how do I identify like specifically child therapists?
Yeah, well, just like a professional organization to plug into in the Portland metropolitan area.
Yeah, it's more of the fact of like, it's really hard to find ones that have a space that's open.
Right.
And so what ends up happening is a lot of times you end up on this like perpetual waiting list in different areas. So is there a way to start to circumvent that if you need help earlier than that?
Great question.
Yeah, so thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that. So there are a couple of different ways to either circumvent that. There are definitely places where it'll just feel like you're waiting forever and ever and ever. The place that I worked, I used to work at a place called Lines for Life. It is technically a suicide hotline, but they do have access to literally every possible thing. I'm trying to remember the name of the website. Oh, it's going to come to me in just a second.
Well, it's probably, you can probably Google Lines for Life.
You can definitely Google Lines for Life, and I know they have chat possibilities. I know they have texting. They also have phone calls. I'm trying to think of the website, and I think it'll come to me by the end of this. At least that is the hope. I'm actually going to Google it while I'm thinking about it.
That'd be great. In fact, while you're doing that, I'm just going to mention a couple things before I do the door prize, because it is actually amazingly almost 7.
Wow.
And I don't want to keep you guys. Firefly has openings. Okay, thank you, San Juana. Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to, you guys, I just messed up my screen there. Let me just try that one more time. Sorry about that. Well, I can't seem to share it. Okay, there it is. So I just wanted to let you guys know that Washington County Kids is a 501c3 nonprofit. We appreciate you being here. We have 4 other parent speaker series coming up the next 4 Tuesdays, so feel free to register for those as well on different topics. And we have a summer program expo where we will have providers on hand from Washington County who will have summer programs that they'll talk about that your kids, you may want to get your kids involved in, and that's on Wednesday, April 14th. We are certainly grateful to Travis for being our presenter today. Travis, great job. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
And any more information about us you can get from our website, washingtoncountykids.org. Katie, is there anything else before I do our door prize?
No, but I will post the links for signing up for other sessions and for our expo session. I'll post those in the chat.
Oh, great. Thank you. Make the link easy for people to get to.
Mhm.
I am going to do a door prize. We have a $10 gift certificate from Safeway or Albertsons that's available to some lucky winner. I will say that I didn't have enough time to get the names of the people off who registered but didn't show up. So you have to be present to win. So you just got to tell me if you're here. We're going to do a Wheel of Fortune kind of prize thing here. So if you're here, when it lands on you, you win. And if this person is not here, we'll do it again. But I think Alfredo's here.
Congratulations.
Is that funny? Alfredo, are you here? Oh, Alfredo, you are here. Alfredo Ortega.
Yeah, he's here.
Okay, so Alfredo,
Oh,
we'll
You can unmute Alfredo.
I'm asking to unmute, but I don't know if, oh, there he is. You there?
Yeah. Hello.
Congratulations, you just won the $10. So I'll send you an email after the event and we'll work out getting you the gift certificates, okay?
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks
So-
so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you
bye.
very much, everyone, for participating and being here. And thanks again to Travis. Great job.
Thank you, Travis.
We look forward to seeing you all soon in the future.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you,
Great to
Travis.
see you.
Yeah, no problem. I
Travis,
hope
if
you all
you-
have a
thank
wonderful
you.
evening.
Travis, if you
Thank
can
you,
hang out for a
Talia.
second.
I will.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Talia.